What's up, everyone? Welcome to This Day in Philly Sports History for March 23rd, 2023. That's a lot of threes and twos today. I'm your host, Jim Montgomery. We've got a big show today, so let's go ahead and get right into it. Let's start with today's Philly Sports Women's History Spotlight. Today we spotlight Vonnie Gros. She was an All-American field hockey and lacrosse player at Ursinus. She played for the U.S. national team field hockey for 13 years. She was the head coach at Westchester for 12 years for field hockey. 107 and 16, good for an 81% winning percentage. She went from 1972 to 1976 and only lost one game. That's like 5 seasons where she lost one game. She led them to 2 AIAW titles. If you remember from earlier this week and the week before, that was the early incarnation of the women's NCAA tournament. Started in the mid-70s, early to mid-70s, so she was very instrumental in winning a lot of games early on in that. She coached the U.S. national team to the 84 bronze medal in the Olympics. She was a charter inductee into the Field Hockey Hall of Fame, the Lacrosse Hall of Fame, Chester County Hall of Fame, Westchester Hall of Fame, Philly Sports Hall of Fame, the turf field where the Westchester field hockey and women's lacrosse team play is named after her. Just a true trailblazer in the field hockey and lacrosse world. Meant so much, inspired so many, and just, again, like many of the women we've been talking about this month, just one of the best to ever do it. So today we shout out you, Miss Vonnie Gros. All right, so lots to get to today. I want to start with something I found that was interesting, and I saw that on Twitter there was a debate. Ray Dininger had asked a question, I guess, on WIP, and he asked who the best athlete currently is in Philly right now, and he made his pick, but I think you got to kind of preface that with a little bit more, because I think athlete is way different than player. To be honest, I feel the best athlete is probably Jalen Hurts, just for everything he can do. But player, I think you look at it a little bit differently. And I think ultimately it comes down to 3 guys. And I think we're in a very unique spot for Philly. And I could be wrong. I'm sure you go back to the 80s with like Schmitty and Dr. J, and maybe some of the guys on the Eagles. I don't know, but where we have 3 guys who are at the very top of their sport. So you have Hurts, you have Bryce Harper, and you have Joel Embiid. And I don't know, you kind of look at it big picture. Athletic-wise, yeah, I mean, they're all great athletes in their own way. But to me, the best player is the guy who consistently does what he's supposed to do and what he can do and is the most valuable to his team and actually gets the job done in crunch time. So with that sort of caveat and parameters around it, I think for now, and I'm sure I'm going to get a ton of hate mail for this, I think for now you have to take Jalen Hurts out of it because he's only really done it for 1 year. I hope that in a year or 2, 3, we're talking and having a whole different conversation about this. But I think you need to take him out. So to me, then it comes down to Bryce and Joe. And I think that's a tough decision. And to me, Didinger said Harper was, and I think I have to agree with him right now. And in 2 months after this playoff runs, 3 months when this playoff run is over for the Sixers, I might change my mind, but I think for right now, just because he's won an MVP in Philly, he was just they don't go on that World Series run last year, obviously without him. Just the clutchness of his hits in the playoffs, and we haven't quite seen that from Joe. If Joe gets out of the second round, takes them to the Eastern Conference Finals, possibly even knocks off Boston or Milwaukee and gets to the finals, I think we're having a different conversation. But it's just an interesting thing because you could make the argument for all 3 of them. And I wouldn't disagree with you or say you're crazy. But tell me what you think. Leave me a comment, message, whatever. Who is the best athlete/player right now in Philadelphia? And maybe it's the guy that maybe it's not one of those 3 guys, but let me know. It's definitely interesting fodder and just something that we could spark some debates about. All right, Back to the Future. I'm going to be recording tonight. Going to do the Phillies preview. So be sure to check that out. It's a rainy day today in Philly, so go ahead and just check out some past episodes to get yourself prepared for that. I am eventually going to be tweaking some things with Back to the Future, but for now, be sure to check that out. Probably later this evening, I'll have it posted. Speaking of the Phillies, quick update. Bad news on the Ranger Suarez front. His arm's now hurting, and luckily they have some depth in their starting rotation, but hopefully this is nothing serious. But I think personally it's a reason for concern, especially after making that deep run and knowing that he played such an instrumental role in that. So it's something worth monitoring. Not good when he is our fourth starter right now, but to me that was, and we'll talk more about it tonight, but to me that was one of the strengths of this team going into the season. So definitely worth monitoring. They start in exactly a week. This time next week we'll be gearing up for Phillies opening day. Sixers update. They won last night 116-91 over the Bulls. Just a dominant effort from start to finish. They jumped out to a 17-0 lead. I think at one point it was 29-1 or 27-1. They kind of coasted. There was no Joe in the second half. Originally, on the TV report, they said that it was just because of the scoring, almost like a load management type thing. There was some calf soreness. And again, it's late in the season. I have a feeling had it been a closer game or a more meaningful game, he would have played. Definitely worth keeping an eye on, but I think it was more just kind of a load management type thing. They, like I said, they came back, avenged the loss from the other night, and did so in dominating fashion. Big game coming up this weekend. I think either tomorrow or Saturday against the Warriors. So they're going on a nice little. Hopefully they complete this road trip similar to the last one. Going to stick with the Sixers today, and this is one of the most bizarre and interesting and just like crazy things that I don't necessarily think we would see that much today. But on this day, March 23rd, 1979, the Sixers and Nets played somewhat of a doubleheader. So to give you the backstory, on November 8th, 1978, earlier that season, the Sixers beat the Nets 137-133 in double overtime, or so they thought. The Nets coach and star player Bernard King were both assessed technicals in that game in the third quarter. Ultimately, both were ejected, but the refs gave out one or two too many free throws to the Sixers, which in a game that was a 4-point game, obviously you have to kind of think like, well, what would have happened if we didn't do that? It changed the whole complexity of the game. So they protested and were actually successful and won their protest. So the final 5 minutes and 50 seconds of the third quarter and the fourth quarter were replayed. So I guess they chose the next time the Nets came to Philly, which was March 23rd, 1979. So there was the regularly scheduled game and then the quarter and a half of the other game they had to play. So they played the quarter and a half first. The Sixers did win 123-117, so it didn't go into double overtime, thankfully. But the interesting piece to all this and why, like, the protesting game of itself is not necessarily that uncommon. It happens, or bizarre. The bizarre thing for this is between November and March, the Sixers and the Nets had made a trade. The Sixers traded Harvey Catchings and Ralph Simpson for Eric Money and Al Skinner. But wait, it gets better. So the final box score officially, now you can look it up, and I looked on, I have a newspapers.com account, and I went to the Daily News that day, and sure enough, the final box score had Money, who played the first 2.5 quarters with the Nets, on the Nets box score, scoring 23 points for the Nets. He played in that second game and scored 4 points for the Sixers. It's like one of the only times that I'm aware of that I could find where guys were on a box score for both teams. And Simpson in that game also had 2 assists in the box score for both teams. And in case you're wondering, the Sixers did win the originally scheduled game that night, 110-98. I read some of the interviews with the players afterwards. Doc was just exhausted because essentially they played a double overtime game, or actually probably more than a double overtime game considering the quarter's 12 minutes. So just an interesting thing. And then another little tidbit to make things worse for the Nets, the Sixers swept them in the first round of the playoffs that year. So on this day, back in 1979, the Sixers and Nets played a quasi-doubleheader where they finished the last quarter and a half of a successful protest game and then their regularly scheduled game. But the big story is Eric Money for the Sixers being in the box score, scoring points for both teams in the same game. So kind of an interesting tidbit there. But all right, go have yourselves a Thursday. It's rainy. Be sure to let me know what you think about who the best player right now is in Philadelphia. I mean, like I said, is there an era that I'm missing that maybe there is a time when they had 3 guys at the very top of their respective sports? But for my money right now, this minute, March 23rd at 7:27 a.m., I have to go with Bryce Harper. Ask me again in 2 months, I'll probably, hopefully, be going for Joel Embiid. But let me know what you think. Have yourselves a Thursday. This has been This Day in Philly Sports History. I'm Jim Montgomery, and until next time, I'll see you when I see you.